We're going to do some notan. Notan is a Japanese word that means the harmony between light and dark. There's no direct translation for it. But throughout the history of man, probably, or human beings probably, one quality of composition is the relationship or the beautiful shapes of lights and darks. There are, of course, many considerations for composition. There's line, there's texture, there's craftsmanship of rendering and all those things. But one very important one is this relationship between light and dark. And as we see in a painting here by Monet, The House of Parliament, Sunset, when it's reduced to just its light and dark components, even though there's color in here, these colors translate to a pattern of light and dark as we see here. And this has been true for all of art, really. Here we have a Vermeer. He was much earlier than Monet. And of course we love the beautiful rendering that Vermeer could do of the human figure. We love the detail, the textures, the colors, and so forth. But reduced to its black and white component, and here we have gray, so this would be a two-tone notan as opposed to just a black and white notan. But when it's reduced to those components, it has a very powerful harmony between its lights and darks. So there's an exercise we can do to experience this notan. And it's with black paper on white paper, and this is a very simple one, and I recommend that if someone tries this, that they start out very simply, and I'll show you why. I have a black square here, and this is a 4x4, and this is just a white sheet of typing paper. And I'm going to start out by cutting just some very simple rectangular shapes. I'm not measuring, definitely don't need or want to measure really. I want this to be a very visual exercise, and I'm not going to cut the corners. It's recommended in this particular exercise to only cut into the sides. So I'm going to cut a variety of shapes here. And throughout this exercise, it's really important not to cut shapes that are recognizable subject matter, because we don't want to get attached to or married to subject matter in this exercise. We want to really have the pure experience of just shape and tone. And it just takes out one of the elements of challenge. So now I have these pieces, and I have a piece of scratch paper here to glue on. I have some Elmer's glue stick. There are other brands, but this one is the one that I happen to find. And the first thing I'm going to do is put this down on the paper to secure it. And I want to make sure I get the corners so that they don't flop up, because that would create a shadow, and I don't want a shadow in this. I really want a pure black image on a pure white image. So there's my shape. This is also an exercise some people would call figure ground or white space or empty space. These are all terms that are used when talking about composition. And apparently it's one of those things that all human beings respond to. If we looked at cave paintings, we would probably have fun looking at the pattern of light and dark. Now, what I want to do is match these shapes that I cut out to themselves, make sure I get the same shapes. And then I'm going to turn them out like this. In other words, mirror themselves. And because these are very simple, I don't really have to make sure I glue the back. I'm going to advance my glue stick here. There we go. But I'll do that anyway because in a more complicated exercise, that's important. And this is one of those exercises that it's fun to do. It doesn't take a lot of skill to learn to do. And it's good to just go with the program here. Sometimes it's good to think outside the box, and we can certainly do that later. But in these first Noton exercises, it's good because it's a sort of built-in harmonious image that we end up with. And so it helps us to see what that looks like without having to think about trying to do that, which is something that comes later, something we might want to apply to artwork. But at this point, it's a sort of ready-made harmony. So that's good to be able to experience. So that's a very simple example. I'll show what happens when you do something more complicated. This is one that's a little more complicated. Some curvy lines there. This one even more so. And I think you will see the what happens when you start getting really complex. So I'm just cutting these shapes out. And again, I'm not cutting the corners. I'm just cutting on the sides. Just sort of stream of consciousness here. I won't do any more than that for now, just to show what happens when you do something more complex. Get this down on the page. And then matching up these shapes gets a little more complicated to do them and mirror them. For instance, this one was like this, so I want to make sure I glue the back side of that so that I can do its mirror. I've already gotten confused. Okay, so that would go like that. Huh. Like I said. Okay, there we go. Let's try another one. That's that one, so I want to glue the reverse side. And if you make a mistake and glue the front side, it dries, so you can just go ahead and glue the back side and it won't matter. So this was like this. And I want it to be like this. And so forth. Now, if you're trying this exercise, I suggest you stop the video here and do a couple of those, very simple and then a little more complicated, and then come back and I'll show you a variation of this exercise, which would be something like this, where you cut out a white form, or cut out a form from the black square or rectangle and put it right side by side, and then put some gray, what would function as gray, or a color that would look like gray, around it. So I have here one that I started, which is this. And so if I put this here, now I need some paper that is, I don't have any gray. If I had gray, I would use it, but I don't. So I want to use something that functions as gray. And I think the blue is the closest to that. One way I tell is to hold up another color and put my filter here. And you can see that that pink looks like a different color, which it is. But if you put a filter over it, you can see it basically functions as white. So that this, hold this, this looks the same tone. We're talking tone now. I tried an orange and it is pretty much the same way. When I put a filter on it, it functions as white. So the blue functions as part way between the black and the white. So that's what I'm going to use. And again, I'm going to bypass the need for a ruler or a pencil. I'm going to put some strips across there. So I'm just going to cut. It doesn't matter if they're not exactly square or straight. So I'm going to measure like that. So I need to take a little bit off here. In order to get the same, if I want to have the same width there. I'm just going to cut that off. And then glue that down. That begins to have a very interesting look, and then I'll put some on the bottom here, and maybe I'll cut something a little bit thicker just for interest's sake. There goes my scissors. So maybe put that down there, and maybe just for fun I'll overlap those a little bit. See what that looks like. Well, that's kind of interesting. So I will put this down first. And then I'm going to put this one down. Now, because this isn't anything recognizable, I don't have to worry about which way I put it. So I could put it to mirror that shape, or I could turn it just a little bit because it doesn't really matter. And makes it kind of an interesting image there. So you can see there the possibilities are endless.